Yellowstone Season 5, Episode 14 Review. Taylor Sheridan's predictable finale is a devastating emotional letdown. Although the future of Yellowstone remains unclear following the airing of Life is a Promise, it's clear the Season 5 finale is designed to act as a series finale, but it fails to achieve all the great qualities of one. Taylor Sheridan's TV show seemingly ends with conclusions to most of the characters' stories, which is a good thing at first glance. Under the surface, though, each development in Yellowstone Season 5, Episode 14 lacks surprise and impact, making the hour quite forgettable despite its perceived significance to not only the neo-Western drama series, but also to TV history. Since its 2018 premiere, Yellowstone has taken television by storm. The show has been successful in drawing a wide audience and keeping them hooked. Critics and viewers alike have loved Yellowstone and often given Sheridan his flowers for creating such a gripping story about a complex family who owns the largest ranch in Montana. However, the series has fallen short of expectations in its fifth and perhaps final season. Yellowstone Season 6 might still happen, giving Sheridan a chance to fix his mistakes. For now, though, the show ends on a disappointing note. Following the painfully uneventful Yellowstone Season 5, Episode 13, many had the same predictions regarding what would happen in the finale. Beth was going to kill Jamie, Rip would dispose of his body, and Case would sell the ranch to Chief Rainwater and the Broken Rock Reservation. Unfortunately, for those hoping to be wrong and be surprised, the events of Yellowstone Season 5, Episode 14 play out exactly as expected. Following John's funeral, Beth finally has the drive to get revenge for her father's death and heads to Jamie's house. Beth attacks her brother and right when Jamie gets the upper hand. Rip arrives. While Rip holds him, Beth stabs Jamie, killing him and winning the long-winded Yellowstone-Dutton family war. Almost everyone knew that Beth would be the one to murder Jamie, and anyone could predict that Case would sell the ranch to Chief Rainwater and create his own with his family after Episode 13. Consequently, the finale's big events are dissatisfying. Given the neo-Western drama's history and previous stakes, someone had to die in the Yellowstone finale. Jamie was the character at the top of everyone's list heading into the season's final episode. Because his death was expected, I hoped that Jamie's demise would at least be satisfying and effective. Instead, Beth killing her brother lacks intrigue or suspense. For a character who has been so important to Yellowstone's story, Jamie's death scene is anticlimactic, even though it should be one of the show's biggest moments. If there is one thing the Season 5 finale does right, it's John Dutton's funeral. Ever since Kevin Costner exited Yellowstone ahead of Season 5, Part 2, it was only a matter of time before the series paid tribute to his character. Thankfully, Taylor Sheridan picked the right time to do so, as the Dutton family's farewell to the patriarch is heartfelt, poignant, and memorable. Each Yellowstone Season 5, Part 2 character, at least those who were close to John, gets to say goodbye to John during the finale. As a result, John's story finally feels like it has come to a proper end. Now the family can move on from Costner's character and the ranch without having to look back. If the majority of the Yellowstone Season 5 finale was similar to John's funeral scene, the episode would have been much better. At long last, we reach the end of the trail, and not with a bang, but with a resigned sigh echoing through the Montana mountains. Yellowstone Season 5, Episode 14, promised to be a sweeping emotional culmination to years of family feuds, political power plays, and cowboy code ethics. Instead, Taylor Sheridan's finale delivered a formulaic wrap-up that leaned heavily on predictability, leaned away from emotional payoff, and left longtime fans wondering, was this really what it was all building toward? From the outset, Sheridan's hallmark grit was present. The ranch landscapes looked as majestic as ever. The horses galloped dramatically in slow motion, and Beth still carried herself like she could level a small country with a single glance. But all the visual poetry and snarled one-liners couldn't mask the fact that the finale was mostly circling the emotional drain, rather than diving in. Let's start with the obvious. John Dutton. Kevin Costner's portrayal of the aging patriarch has always been the bedrock of the show, but episode 14 treats him more like a passive ghost of himself. He mumbles a few speeches about legacy and land, stares wistfully at the mountains, and then rides off, not into a dramatic shootout or a blaze of political glory, but into a series of increasingly sentimental and dull flashbacks. It's as if Sheridan decided the best way to conclude John Dutton's arc was by simply ending it without real consequence. A character this monumental deserved something riskier, something heartbreaking, or at the very least, something unexpected. Instead, we got a soft fade into rancher mythology. And then there's Beth and Jamie, the nuclear sibling rivalry that once promised to detonate in apocalyptic fashion fizzled like wet dynamite. Their long-standing hatred boiled for 5 seasons, only for episode 14 to diffuse it with clumsy exposition and a forced twist. Sheridan had a Goldman here, the adopted brother turned political threat, versus the volatile sister willing to burn down the world to protect her father. Instead of capitalizing on that dynamite, Sheridan gave us a limp confrontation in the governor's office, punctuated by a few barbed insults and an off-screen resolution that felt more like a legal settlement than the explosive climax we've been teased for years. Meanwhile, Case and Monica, often the show's emotional heart, were reduced to background noise. Case's spiritual journey and Monica's trauma, both once treated with solemnity and depth, became footnotes in a finale that couldn't figure out where to place them. One scene had them discussing life off the ranch. Another had them back in Yellowstone's orbit. Their story seemed to waver with the wind, as if even the writers weren't sure what to do with them by the end. What was the point of Case's ominous vision quest from season 4 if it led here to nowhere? Even Thomas Rainwater, a character who once brought moral nuance and depth, was relegated to a glorified cameo. His tense alliance with John, his dreams of reclaiming the land for his people, all dissolved into vague platitudes and scenes that felt more obligatory than meaningful. It's a shame. Rainwater was one of the few characters who truly challenged the Dutton worldview, and to see him fade into narrative irrelevance was not just disappointing, it was a waste. The finale also leaned hard on flashbacks and voiceovers, devices that, while beautifully shot and often poetic, signaled a writer more interested in romanticizing the past than delivering a compelling present. There's only so much philosophical waxing a show can do before the audience starts craving real action. And no, watching cowboys round up cattle under a golden sunset doesn't count as action when the emotional stakes have already flatlined. What's perhaps most frustrating is that the seeds of greatness were all here. Powerful characters, unresolved feuds, moral ambiguity, but Sheridan played it safe. Instead of risk, he gave resolution. Instead of catharsis, he gave compromise. The finale functioned like a tidy closing argument. Here's what happened, here's why it mattered, and here's everyone riding into the sunset. Cue the melancholic fiddle music. To be fair, the acting remained top tier. Kelly Rayleigh continues to pour venom and vulnerability into Beth with every smoky line delivery. And Wes Bentley still makes Jamie sympathetic despite being painted into a narrative corner. Even the minor characters, like Rip and Carter, added texture to an otherwise flat episode. But strong performances can only elevate weak writing so far.